One, two, one, two, one, two, one, two, one, two, one, two. All right, live. How's everybody doing? It's been a busy day, busy couple days. Hope everybody is having a good day. Big show ahead, big story. And we have a lot to discuss today. Jordan Chariton, status quo. I am wonderfully joined again by Melissa Mays, a Flint resident, an activist who has had her phone blown up the last 3 days, the last 5 years actually, but the last 3 days. Hold on one second, because I'm doing everything. Got to send a text message to the people. Can you?
Oh, hi, Michael. Hey, Kelly. And Melly. And Kat. You guys are awesome.
Oh, Melissa, here's what I want to do. There's two different things that we need to go through today. Number one, the Attorney General of Michigan, Dana Nessel, who had a press conference today. She handed it over to her Solicitor General, who announced charges against former Governor Rick Snyder and 8 other defendants. But at the same time, there is a story that myself and Jen, my partner, worked on that, interestingly, they didn't mention. And I don't think they particularly want mentioned. But we're going to do our darndest to get out there. It just so happens that yesterday, when I sent a request for comment to the Attorney General for the story, which ended up going out on The Intercept, the link is right under this live stream video. What do you know? Half hour after I emailed them for comment, that the nature of the charges against Governor Snyder leaked. So it seems that they rushed out ahead of time what the charges were going to be. Before our story with The Intercept could go out. So I'm going to get into our story with The Intercept, which, as far as I know, and now has been backed up by 2 other sources, which we're going to talk about. But before we get into anything, I wanted to ask you, as a resident, for those that don't know, Melissa lived in Flint when the water was switched in 2014. She's got 3 kids. They've all been made sick because of the water. You've had major health problems because of the water. What is your initial reaction to Governor Snyder being charged with 2 counts of willful neglect of duty, which in Michigan is a misdemeanor? You could face upwards of a year in jail with a $1,000 fine.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive that basically it sounds like he forgot to send in, put a cover sheet on his TPS report. It was, I was saying, like when you and I talked the other day, that I was, I couldn't let myself get excited because of the fact that I knew that it would most likely be something like jaywalking tickets. Somebody had told me that speeding fines are actually more than what he's getting levied. And that basically it was going to be I went from saying a slap on the wrist to a tap, because a slap would actually sting. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. I don't even think that's the right word for it. The fact that he was going to basically be facing a $1,000 fine, which if you do the simple math, it's 1 cent, 1 penny per poisoned person in Flint. I mean, dude poisoned 100,000 people. And let me just be clear that it wasn't just our pipes got old over time. Governor Snyder, after the residents of Michigan had voted his, Public Act 4, his emergency manager law down, overwhelmingly voted against it. He pushed he made a few alterations and attached a $30,000 appropriation so it couldn't come back up for a referendum. His Public Act 436, which is his version of the emergency manager law, which allowed him to take unilateral control over cities like Flint, Benton Harbor, and Detroit, and then put in his own person, an appointed, unelected bean counter, basically, to make all the decisions, to suspend local democracy and take away our voices and the people we voted for, and make these decisions, like switching the water, refusing to treat it, and to cover it up. So basically the man became, appointed himself dictator, and he was all kind of bragging about, look at the successes of my emergency manager law, while just basically looking away from all the damages. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not how this works. When you decide to take control over a city, you get the, and what did he say? The buck stops with me. Well, apparently it doesn't. Apparently he's going to point the finger at everybody else and then just get handed a basic parking ticket and walk away for, poisoning 100,000 people, making our futures far more difficult, damaging our immune systems, making us far more susceptible to COVID-19, and then also killing countless people. I thought murder was a crime. I thought that killing people wasn't legal, and it wasn't something you get a slap on the wrist for. Apparently not. And so basically it's telling us here in Flint that, guess what? You're worth 1 cent. 1 single penny, and that's the max fine. So who knows if he's going to get a discount or whatever. But yeah, so basically it's saying that, rich white men at Ann Arbor, Michigan can go ahead and, poison, beat, kill, lie about the damage being done to poor Black and brown bodies. And apparently that hasn't changed. And we're going to fight like hell, and with your help, to make that change. I mean, Flint's made history for lots of things, sit-down strikes, and of course the water crisis, that's been going on for 2,456 days and counting. And so hopefully we can start to make that change where wealthy white folks, politicians or not, can't just, let a city die, and that they've caused by their own policies. You can't murder people by policy and then walk away and say, oh, I was just doing my job, and we can get rid of this whole governmental immunity thing because there's far too many criminals hiding behind it.
So, Melissa, apologies that I'm about to give the audience a history lesson that you already know, but I want the audience to fully understand everything before we set up what the original investigators had found. So, for those that don't know, in 2016, the then Attorney General of Michigan, he was a Republican, his name was Bill Schuette, he announced a criminal investigation into the Flint water crisis. Of course, 2014, the water is switched. There's a lot of reasons why they did that, but they did not add the proper chemicals into the water to prevent lead from leaching from the pipes into the water. Children, adults poisoned. There was also a deadly Legionella outbreak, which is a waterborne illness that killed, by the state's number, 12 people. That's nonsense. That probably killed hundreds of people. We'll never fully know the true death count from Legionella because a lot of entities covered it up. But in 2016, the Republican Attorney General, Bill Schuette, announces a criminal investigation. He hired an outside special prosecutor. Just think about it like Robert Mueller was an outside special prosecutor. This was kind of like the Robert Mueller of Flint, the special prosecutor. His name was Todd Flood. And Todd Flood's investigation started in 2016, and it went to 2019. He had a team, I would guess, between 20 to 30 investigators and prosecutors. They charged 15 officials between the state of Michigan and the city of Flint. They charged Nick Lyon, who was the health director for Snyder. They charged the chief medical executive, Eden Wells, with involuntary manslaughter, both of them. They charged several officials from the state environmental department. They charged city of Flint officials. They charged emergency managers who were appointed by Governor Snyder. And in 2019, when the new government came in, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, a Democrat, and Attorney General Dana Nessel came in. Dana Nessel fired the original special prosecutor and his team. She cited major flaws in their investigation, as well as major flaws in the amount of evidence they compiled. So that is the split. There was an investigation from 2016 to 2019 with a special prosecutor, his team, and then the new attorney general, a Democrat, came in and essentially purged the entire thing and started over. So I and Jen, this really was a year worth of an investigation. It started with our story in Vice, where we broke a lot of news about what Snyder knew and when he knew. But over a year of investigating, including recently where I drove 9 hours straight during a pandemic to Michigan and then 9 hours back, we discovered that the original investigators who were fired, so this special prosecutor, the original investigators that were fired by the attorney general, again, can't get in her head. I don't, just take her word for it. Why she fired them? That they had found evidence to charge Governor Snyder with misconduct in office, which can be charged as a felony. It can be charged as a misdemeanor. My understanding, it was going to be charged as a felony misconduct in office, which has upwards of 5 years in prison. They were going to charge him with neglect of duty, which is the misdemeanor that he was charged with today. And at the time of their firing, I have at least 4 sources with the criminal investigation that they were building a case to charge him with involuntary manslaughter, which is an obvious major felony. It carries with it at least 15 years in prison. And they were not done. My understanding is they were, a loose number, let's say 75 to 80% the way there, but they were not done. And they had defendants cooperating to, I guess, potentially flip on higher people up the totem pole, but they were dismissed. So with that background, and I'm going to get to what those investigators found, but with that background, I just want to show you, you don't have to take my word for it. This came out today. There's 2 other journalists. One goes by the name Kayla. Let me get her tweet. This is Kayla Rubel. She was one of the reporters on a great story PBS Frontline did. They did a great story on the Legionella outbreak that killed, by PBS's count, could have killed as many as 115 people. She wrote, she was one of those reporters with PBS, important details about the path former Flint water crisis criminal investigators were on before the special prosecutor was ousted by Attorney General Nessel in 2019. I could independently confirm they built a felony involuntary manslaughter case against Snyder. So that is a PBS reporter confirming what Jen and I just broke yesterday. Then you have Charlie LaDuff, who is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist in Michigan, a badass, might I add. He wrote, I too can independently confirm that special prosecutors were building an involuntary manslaughter case against Governor Snyder. Moreover, they were assembling a racketeering case, which is usually against the mafia. Both seem to have vaporized with today's charges. Read this excellent story by Jordan Chariton. He left out Jen, but that's okay. So before we get to Jen and my story, Melissa, I want to just ask you, your understanding of why this current attorney general basically purged the original investigators was they had flawed evidence or they didn't get the proper documentation. I have a follow-up. Jen and I have a follow-up coming up on, let's just say, part of why they didn't get the proper enough evidence was because there was a guerrilla war waged by Governor Snyder and his lawyers to obstruct and to not give them the evidence, including potential destruction of evidence, but stay tuned for that. Melissa, what is your thoughts when our reporting, 2 other reporters, that you had a criminal investigation team for 3 years? They found evidence of misconduct in office, which is a felony related to Governor Snyder, also neglect of duty, which is a misdemeanor, and not that they were ready to charge, but that they were, let's say, 3/4 of the way towards charging him, the governor of Michigan, with involuntary manslaughter, but they were purged. And now the current AG, who claims she wasn't involved with the investigation, she says she recused herself. They're charging him with the legal equivalent of jaywalking.
Yeah, pretty much. So we knew, as long as Bill Schuette, who was good friends with Governor Snyder, as long as he was, the attorney general and in office and also running for governor after Snyder was term limited, we knew that it probably wasn't going to hit Snyder. And it probably wasn't going to hit him while he was in office either. But we knew that Todd Flood and his investigation team were working up the ladder. I mean, that's also how things work. You get people to flip, get the little guys to flip, go big and big and big. And we were hearing that, the people who are on the lower on the ladder were wanting to cut some deals. So we got kind of excited, but also we were involved with that. Todd Flood and his team, the investigators, came to Flint repeatedly and spoke with Flint residents, looked at our evidence, gathered up everything, treated us with respect, and acknowledged the expertise that we have been living through this. So we knew that we were a part of it and where things were going. And then Todd Flood would answer our questions, that he legally could, especially with ongoing investigations. But he would explain why this or that. So that way the people of Flint were involved and understanding in their own case. Because again, the focus of all this is supposed to be justice for Flint residents. And then when Dana Nessel came in, we're like, okay, well, this is a different attorney general, and this is going to go well, hopefully, except for the fact that a few months before she was elected, we were hearing rumors that she was going to fire Todd Flood. And at first, and his team, but first it was saying because Todd Flood was a Republican who had donated to Snyder's campaign. Of course, that's before he knew all this stuff and was involved in it. That's why she just couldn't have him, whatever. But I felt that it was funnier and much more of a burn for a Republican to be fully investigating and charging other Republicans. I enjoy that. Petty Melissa enjoyed that. But the problem is that doesn't change the facts. I didn't care who Todd Flood voted for. If he voted for Trump, I'd have a concern. But I didn't care because he was fighting and honest with us and upfront. So then when Dana Nessel comes out and we hadn't heard anything, and she goes ahead and says, we, of course, most of us found out from outside media and social media that she was dropping all of the charges, even the ones that hadn't even made it to hearing. The day before, two people, Eden Wells and Nick Lyon, state doctors and the head of Department of Health and Human Services, were being bound over for manslaughter to trial, meaning awesome, it's going to go in front of a jury of my peers. People in Flint are going to be able to hear what's happening after one of the longest, I think it's the longest pre-trial in the state of Michigan. And it was all this fighting back and forth, but it was moving forward. The judge found, the Attorney General's office had said that there were flaws with the investigation and the evidence. Well, the judges certainly didn't see a problem with it because they agreed to hold them over a trial, move everything forward like it should go. So then,
just so the audience understands what that means, there were 2 year-long pre-trials for Nick Lyon, who was Governor Snyder's health department director. So in his cabinet. There was a year-long pretrial for him and a year-long pretrial for Eden Wells, who was basically the number 2 health official. And after those year-long pretrials, which Todd Flood, the original special prosecutor, prosecuted, 2 judges decided there was enough evidence that they should face trial. In fact, the judge called Nick Lyon corrupt while ruling he had to face trial. So that's what Todd Flood, the former prosecutor, and his team had achieved, that Attorney General Nessel basically dismissed. Go on.
Right. And not to mention, it's not even that hidden because during the pretrial, Nick Lyon said, we can't save everybody and everybody has to die from something. Because right. He was covering up the fact that people were dying from Legionnaires, which was preventable. You just had to let people know and deal with the water situation. But then also, and then Eden Wells, who was the state's top doctor, said, well, public health isn't really my concern. Your job. So those come out during pretrial. So it's not like they were innocent people being drugged through the mud for some kind of political thing. No, these people were complicit in the murdering of countless, because actually during the pretrials, Todd Flood and his team found 354 more death certificates that were listed as the cause of death was listed as bacterial pneumonia, which is what Legionnaires is. But since nobody was notifying the doctors, like my son had pneumonia September of 2014, which was weird. The doctor wasn't sure why that happened, but they wouldn't think to test for Legionnaires unless you had a hot tub or a commercial air conditioner. And we didn't have either, so it never happened, So there's a lot of people that didn't go test it. The doctors didn't know. And so there was all these people dying. And so Todd Flood said during that same time period, there was an extra 354 death certificates, people, families, loved ones that will never know what actually killed their family members. And they had questions and people needed to give them answers. So, yeah, these people have put us through hell. And I mean, hell is actually a soft term for this, because we have been in prison in our homes with poison water for almost 7 years. So the fact that, Snyder could get a slap on the wrist and up to 1 year is insane, and a $1,000 fine. Come on. But yeah, so that's what we're dealing with. And they were making all these excuses, saying it was political, saying that, the former investigative team, Todd Flood and his team, did a sloppy job that the judge didn't agree with. But then it was about 19 months of radio silence. Nessel and her team did not come. Solicitor General did not come. And actually at the town hall, 3 weeks later, after they had leaked to the media that they were dismissing all the charges, and we got to live through another 3 weeks of traumatic hell, wondering why and what's going to happen. We basically get told that they're basically saying, we're going to look at the evidence and see where it takes us. That was the only answer we could get. And then they were trying to just attack the character and the work of Todd Flood and the investigators. And then when I asked a simple question, which I asked Solicitor General Hamoud, I asked her if, had she been to Flint? Had she spoken to actual residents to find out what our definition of justice is? Because her boss, Attorney General Nessel, was talking about if the cases against Veolia and Lanny engineering firms, was granted and we won them, she was going to take the money and put it back in the state coffers, not to the victims in Flint. And I said, so that's not justice to us. And she started screaming at me, and it's on video and it was hilarious. But also she attacked other Flint residents, people who were witnesses and who had testified during all these pre-trials, PhDs that knew what they were talking about. So it was just nothing to attack. And then it was just this pathetic, well, I have kids and I'm really busy and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that's disgusting. And you are the reason why people like me get, struggle to have any kind of position of power and authority, because they're waiting for me to fake cry, or I'm going to say, oh, I have a uterus, so I can't have any kind of intelligence. So that was insulting to me. So I was mad about that, as, whatever. But then them talking to us like we're stupid, I mean, come on. So yeah. So then, it gets leaked a couple days ago that there's going to be charges. Again, I had very little hope that, it was going to come out anything like this. And, I was unfortunately right that it was going to be garbage, because also, I mean, you've had the evidence about, we'll just say the Vice piece that you did, where you showed that Richard Baird, which is, former Governor Snyder's right-hand man, who does basically all the dirty work so Snyder can keep his hands clean, that he was bribing and silencing Flint residents.
Don't say that. I'm going to get to that. You're getting ahead of me. I want to start, Melissa. I want to show people the core of what we broke for The Intercept yesterday. And I asked the audience, I plead with you, share this story with every single person you know, even people you don't know. It's the only way we're going to get it out, because Melissa could tell you, the Michigan media ain't going to want to report the truth. That's a whole nother story, why the Michigan media and the national media seem to ignore when bombshell after bombshell from us, Jordan and Jen, status coup, first with Vice, now at The Intercept, they seem to ignore explosive journalism. I want to show Melissa, I assume this is the first time you've seen it. Yesterday you saw it when it broke. I want to read to the audience, not the whole story, but just the core part, because to me, I truly don't know what these investigators or Attorney General Michigan Dana Nessel, I don't know what they were looking at, because I know that they have this. I know for a fact that they have the evidence that Jen and I just broke yesterday. So let me show the audience. I'm just going to read this part. By October 2014, 6 months after Flint's water switch, Flint residents had been publicly complaining for months about odorous, discolored water coming from their taps. Residents, including children, were showing city officials rashes spreading across their bodies. In August and September, Flint had issued a boil water advisory. As a result, Snyder requested a briefing on Flint's water problems. On October 1st, he got that briefing, which listed a waterborne disease outbreak as a trigger that could cause a boil water alert, was delivered to the governor. Hey, Melissa, can I ask you a question? Sure. What is the Legionella outbreak? Where does that start?
Well, what starts that is when there's corrosive copper and actually other metals. Legionella will then feed on that corrosion. They will feed on the iron corrosion and the copper and everything. It feeds and then grows. So what happens is that it gets then released when water goes flushing through. It gets released into steam. So you get it by boiling water, by showering, by inhaling the steam, cooking. And so as you're boiling the water to basically get rid of potential bacteria, you're inhaling steam, and guess what's carried in that bacteria. And the funny thing is that at that time, especially when you have small children, they tell you to turn your water heater temperature down so the children don't get scalded. Well, it wasn't high enough to scald out the Legionella.
So I was asking that because Rick Snyder, the governor, in his briefing that he requested, it said waterborne disease could be causing these boil water advisories. Is Legionella a waterborne disease?
Absolutely. It doesn't appear, I mean, that's where it is. It's found in water systems. It's a lot of times found in the biofilm, the protective coating that's built up over decades inside the pipes. But then if you're going to go ahead and run acid and untreated water through the pipes, that biofilm, that protective biofilm containing that bacteria is going to be released right on in with the metals and the other contaminants. But, get you a healthy dose of bacteria with your morning shower and your morning cup of coffee.
So you think Governor Snyder had some, I don't know, health officials or environmental officials who might have informed him that, yeah, Legionella is one of the most common waterborne disease outbreaks? Because that briefing said a waterborne disease outbreak could be one of the things causing this. I'm just saying. So let's continue. We're going to get to the meat of the story now. So he gets the briefing on October 1st. By October 13th, this is not 2020, 2014. We're talking almost 7 years ago. By October 13th, State Health Department epidemiologist Shannon Johnson writes an email to other health officials after she did a study on Legionella in other counties compared to Flint. She says her hypothesis is the source of the outbreak may be Flint's municipal water, i.e. the Flint River, which was just switched 6 months before. So that is the top health official. She is the subject matter expert in the health department on Legionella, saying that is the Legionella outbreak might be caused by the Flint River water. So follow with me. I know this is almost 7 years ago, but these dates are extremely important, and you're going to see why. So that's October 13th. October 14th, Valerie Brader, Governor Snyder's environmental advisor and legal counsel, she wrote an urgent email to the governor's chief of staff and other top officials. She pleads with them. She called it urgent. You got to switch Flint back to Detroit's water system. There's E. coli in this water. There's TTHM violations. TTHM is a carcinogen that can cause cancer. The levels were high with TTHMs, high E. coli, which is a bacteria. So that's October 14th. Valerie Brader, she gets sent to Richard Baird, who is the governor's right-hand man. And Valerie Brader, Richard Baird, and Darnell Early, who is Governor Snyder's emergency manager in Flint, they have a conference call. Valerie Brader, again, tells them, Snyder wasn't on this call, to be clear, tells them you got to switch Flint back to Detroit. She is told it would be too expensive and basically go back to your desk. We reported in the Vice story that Richard Baird, and Melissa, you know who Richard Baird is. We reported in the Vice story that Richard Baird, the governor's right-hand man, who Melissa has a story about her exchange with him, threatened Miss Brader right after that call and basically said, do not send another email about Flint water problems. That's it. Don't send anymore. That's October 14th. That email is sent. And I believe that the conference call happened the next day. Now we're getting to what the original investigation team thought they concluded was the smoking gun. So you have emails about Legionella and the connection to Flint. You have Valerie Brader the next day pleading with them, switch back to Detroit. You have Valerie Brader then being sent to the governor's right-hand man, who I've heard people from Flint call him the governor's henchman. Let's read October 16th, okay? October 16th, according to phone records that we obtained, Jen and Jordan, through the Intercept, On October 16th and 17th, the governor's chief of staff, Dennis Muchmore, and his health director, Nick Lyon, spoke 9 times on the phone in 2 days, way more frequently than they've ever communicated before. After 4 of those calls, so governor's chief of staff, governor's health director, they're on the phone 9 times. 4 of those calls, they hang up. Governor's chief of staff calls the governor right away. In some lines of work, that's called a cutout. That's called a middleman. If I'm the governor, I don't want to talk directly to the health director about what's going on. So I'm going to have my chief of staff do it. And then I'm going to have my chief of staff report right back to me. So here is the bang bang list. You got 10:45 in the morning, October 16th. Chief of staff calls health director. 10:49, 4 minutes later, right when they get off the phone, you got the chief of staff calling the governor. Let me show it. Chief of staff calling the governor. Then the governor calls chief of staff back. Then, this is important, when the governor and the chief of staff get off the phone, a couple minutes later, the chief of staff calls the Michigan Health and Hospital Association. Why is that important? The Michigan Health and Hospital Association is essentially, I don't know, they call it an advocacy organization. It's essentially a PAC. It's essentially a PAC. And the Michigan Health and Hospital Association, it has a bunch of hospitals that are its members. One of the hospitals was McLaren Hospital in Flint. Melissa, can you tell the audience what was happening at McLaren Hospital at the same exact time? The governor's chief of staff, the governor's health director, and the governor were on the phone like a bunch of drunken teenagers. What was happening at McLaren Hospital?
So, of course, the public isn't being told anything. So there's that. But then what we found out from nurses and people who worked inside a McLaren Hospital, they were told, we were actually told that we had a nurse come to our one of our meetings, and she told us straight out that they were told not to put Legionnaires anywhere into the chart, that they were supposed to write it down as the diagnosis is for bacterial pneumonia or a bacterial respiratory infection, but do not list it as Legionnaires. Also, do not allow the patients to actually bathe in the Flint water. They gave them bottled water and sponge baths. So they knew that it was obviously the water was messed up. And during this time, we're seeing in some of the emails and some of the depositions, we're hearing that, McLaren had put an additional filtration system trying to see if it was inside their system, but they weren't getting help. They weren't getting much help at that time. And so the medical professionals were scrambling as people were coming in very, very sick and not knowing why.
So why that's really important is McLaren Hospital, there's been a 7-year tug of war about whether McLaren was the source of the Legionella, whether the Flint River was the source of the Legionella. The facts indicate it was not McLaren Hospital that was the source of the Legionella. It was the Flint River, which McLaren, like other businesses and hospitals, received their water from the Flint River. But McLaren Hospital had a Legionella. They detected Legionella in the system. So at the very time that Shannon Johnson with the health department is sending out an email 3 days before this mad dash of phone calls, my hypothesis is it's not McLaren, she wrote in the email, it's Flint River water. And the governor's environmental attorney is pleading with them to switch Flint back to Detroit. And Dennis Muchmore, the chief of staff, and Nick Lyon, the health director, are on the phone 9 times in 2 days. Prosecutors looked at their phone history. They had only spoken once ever before on the phone, August 2014. You know what happened in August 2014? That's when McLaren first detected Legionella in its water. It's interesting that the first time the chief of staff to Snyder and the health director are on the phone is the same month they detected Legionella in McLaren. So let me keep going through this phone. I know people think, well, why are you going to take me through the whole list? Because it's important. So if you look at the phone logs here, the chief of staff, Dennis Muchmore, right when he gets off the phone, well, not right, a couple minutes after he gets off the phone with Governor Snyder, he calls the Michigan Health and Hospital Association. I just told you, the Michigan Health and Hospital Association, one of its member hospitals is McLaren Flint. McLaren Flint at the time has this Legionella outbreak. By the way, this time, 2 weeks before Governor Snyder is up for re-election as governor. Probably not good if a waterborne bacteria disease gets out while you're trying to get reelected as governor. Another thing about Michigan Health and Hospital Association is that it has a health pack, think like a super PAC. Its health pack, the board of its PAC, was chaired by a McLaren executive. Another McLaren executive sat on the board. So there are major connections between the Michigan Health and Hospital Association and McLaren Hospital, where the Legionella outbreak was happening. So much more calls, Michigan Health and Hospital Association gets off the phone with them, immediately calls back the health department director, Nick Lyon. Again, right after that, he calls Nick Lyon. A couple minutes after, Nick Lyon calls Dennis Muchmore. A couple minutes after, Chief of Staff calls Governor Snyder. A little later within the hour, Chief of Staff calls Maura Corrigan. He is the outgoing health director. Nick Lyon was the incoming health director. Maura Corrigan was leaving her position. Then the Michigan Health and Hospital Association calls back Chief of Staff Dennis Muchmore. In a subpoena, a petition to subpoena that we obtained, Todd Flood, the special prosecutor, writes, they were presumably the Chief of Staff to Governor Snyder was talking to the Michigan Health and Hospital Association about the Legionella outbreak. Then at 12:32 in the afternoon, this is also critical, Genesee County Health Department, Stephanie Connolly emails colleagues about a Legionnaire's patient that Genesee County Health Department was notified about from McLaren Hospital. So this is a patient at McLaren Hospital who the Genesee County Health Department is being made aware of. Quote, this is her email. There was no connection with any previous admits to McLaren. The patient has no travel history, no recent dental work, no visits to the hospital per the client's nurse. Melissa, why would that be important that they are saying this patient, this is right in the middle of those phone calls, that this patient who was in McLaren had no previous history at McLaren and hasn't been to a hospital? Why would that be important?
Well, because if McLaren's the sole source of the, Legionnaire's outbreak, how did somebody who's never set foot in McLaren get Legionnaires? And I mean, the same with Hurley Hospital. There's stories all over of people who, were coming in to get treatment for Legionnaires and hadn't been to McLaren. And, oh my God. And it's interesting how they're just trying to say it's only this one building and it came out of nowhere. And then even after this all came out a couple of days ago, the state is still trying to say McLaren had, was a source of the outbreak. False. And I mean, it's proven in what you found. You've got documentation that they were already doing a study. They were doing a public health study to try to find out what the source of the outbreak was and where these people were getting it. And these people had not set foot in McLaren, meaning McLaren's not where they got it. And there's, it's funny because people have gone through and done these surveys and they ask you, do you live in Flint? Have you used Flint water? Have you been to McLaren? And, those were some of the questions. And they were finding out it's a lot of people who had nothing to do with it. There was a lady who died from Legionnaires and she did not live in Flint, but she worked in Flint. And she was working at a cleaning facility where it was tons of steam and everything. So that's how she got sick. She didn't have a hot tub or any of that stuff. And yet nobody seemed to care. And there were people being transferred down to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor for this disease, and people have died. They started off at Hurley, but people don't walk in healthy to a hospital and then all of a sudden magically get this bacterial disease that starts attacking their lungs, which, by the way, for the people who did recover, made it a lot easier for COVID to do its damage. But yeah, no. So it's not like you walked in and were just sprayed because, and then you were seeing like different articles and McLaren put out statements saying, no, we were testing the water and there was no proof that it wasn't the outside water. We were putting filtration systems and doing everything that we can, and then also, but people were getting sick. And there's also been studies, and what's killing me is they actually proved, they actually linked the Legionnaires in people's bodies to the Legionella in the water system. They linked it genetically. They genetically tested it and found that out. So what does that have to do with McLaren? And yeah, there are a lot of other businesses that were dealing with the bacteria in the water too and had no idea. Restaurants shut down because they had no way of dealing with it. And, because it's not just a filtration system problem, it's everything. Because that bacteria could be in your faucets. It could be anywhere. Now that, all of that was getting released and just flushed right into our homes, it's crazy that they just decided to blame it. But of course, they would do anything to not blame it on the water, because again, who was responsible for putting us on the Flint River to begin with? Governor Snyder and his administration and the Treasury Department. They did not want that touched. And time and time again, they refuse to take the blame. They'll point fingers at anybody else. And then when that doesn't always work, the fun thing that they do to us is they blame the victims. And so somehow it's going to be, after McLaren fights and is like, no, we've got all this proof, what's going to end up happening is they're going to say, well, the residents did it to themselves because they're dirty.
And I kindly ask everybody, we got almost 500 people watching, smash that like button. Smash that like button right under the live stream. Share this live stream. It makes a big difference. So I'm about to show you why it's not our opinion that they were on the phone talking about Legionella. There's evidence that they were on the phone talking about Legionella. And why is this important? I buried the lead. Governor Rick Snyder, in front of Congress, that would be under oath, said, I didn't know anything about the deadly Legionella outbreak until January 2016. I failed math. I think October 2014 is 16 months earlier than January 2016. Why this phone log shows that he did know, I'm about to show you. So let's go on in the phone log here. Thanks for being a sport and bearing with me, Melissa. So Genesee County Health Department basically emails, there's a McLaren patient, but she basically walked in with Legionella. She didn't get it from the hospital. Nick Lyon, the health director, calls the chief of staff to Snyder again. An hour later, Nick Lyon calls the chief of staff to Snyder again. A minute after, the chief of staff calls Governor Snyder. There's bang, bang, so many instances in these 2 days of calls that Nick Lyon and Dennis Muchmore, the health director and the chief of staff, get off the phone. Right away, the chief of staff calls Governor Snyder. That would be a cutout. That would be a middleman. That would be Chief of Staff Dennis Muchmore is operating as the middleman so that Governor Snyder doesn't have to talk directly with the health director about, they're not trying to talk about the weather in these phone calls. Muchmore calls the governor. Then about 5 o'clock, Nick Lyon, the health director, calls the chief of staff again. Then 7:20 at night, the chief of staff calls the outgoing health director again. So then we move forward to the next day, October 17th. If October 16th was kind of like the first smoking gun, October 17th was like a 5-alarm fire for the prosecution. On the morning of the 17th, the county health department and Jim Henry and colleagues spoke with Flint water plant officials. In that meeting, Legionella came up. The Flint water officials acknowledged the city's not testing for Legionella. But they did say, there's a distribution system problem. So this is the morning of the 17th, 11:16 a.m. The governor calls his chief of staff again. An hour later, the health director calls the chief of staff. Then this is a very critical email. 4:31 in the afternoon, October 17th, 2014. Susan Bohm, she's with the health department. She's an epidemiologist. She sends an email out. In that email, she is referencing a phone call that she just got. She gets a phone call from Leanne Schechter-Smith. Leanne Schechter-Smith is the head of the State Environmental Department's Drinking Water Office. What is the Flint water crisis? A major drinking water catastrophe. So Leanne Schechter-Smith, who's the head of the state's Drinking Water Office, calls a health official. She says, Genesee County Health Department is calling me. They're talking about the Legionella outbreak they're having. The governor's office had been involved, right here. The governor's office had been involved in Flint's water problems. To be fair, she didn't say in Legionella, but in Flint's water problems. Well, at that point, one of Flint's major problems was Legionella. Schechter-Smith tried to basically stop the health department from going public about the Legionella outbreak. She warned that an imminent public announcement about the quality of the water would certainly inflame the situation. Melissa, what does that sound like to you? This would certainly inflame the situation if we go public.
I thought it was an interesting adjective and verb. It's going to inflame. Inflame what? Because people at that time, so they switched our water in April 25th of 2014. By May, people were already publicly showing discolored water, rashes, saying that the water smelled foul, tasted terrible. And the funny thing is that the people with black and brown water, or brown and orange, were lucky. That was iron corrosion. And so they at least had a warning that something was wrong with their water. What we found out too late was that, certain bacteria, lead, copper, all these other metals typically don't have a smell, a taste, or a color. So what happened was the state and city went ahead with this PR thing saying, oh, that's just a couple people and they have bad pipes in their house. Of course, me at the time didn't know anything about water scientists or water science, chemistry, that stuff. I paid my water bill, I paid my taxes, figured that the people who were doing, who were over this in the Department of Environmental Quality, they wouldn't lie now, would they? Well, you should have met 2014 Melissa. She was a lot nicer. But then what we find out is that they did everything to cover it up. They knew all of it was going wrong. I believe August of 2014 was also the highest lead test that the city's ever had in its history. So that had happened. They didn't even mail the results to the guy, so he had no idea. We actually got it through FOIA and had to knock on his door and tell him the great news, but far later, obviously. But yeah, so people were dying, and but they were complaining, and we were complaining about what we could see, taste, and smell. We had no idea just how bad it was, and they had absolutely done everything they could to prevent us from learning it. So basically, they said, oh, it's them poor black people who don't want to pay their water bills, complaining about some smells. It's because they got old pipes. It's their personal problem. We're doing everything we can. It's just hard water. But what they were doing by dismissing us was so nobody would listen to us and take us seriously, trying to make it like the boy who cried wolf type of thing, because we didn't have the proper testing at the time or any of that. And actually, the state was doing everything they could to cheat on that testing as well. So they were talking about inflaming the situation before Snyder's reelection, where he was reelecting. By the way, his nickname, he named himself, was One Tough Nerd, and he pleads awfully stupid and dumb for a nerd that he professes that he reads everything and he knows everything that's going on because he wants to absorb all this information, but yet magically he had no idea what Legionnaires was, or that it was killing people in Flint. No way, no, not so much. So it was going to inflame what was inflaming the problem was basically going to be exposing the truth, and rightfully so. People might have been a little upset and not voted for him.
And I also think this is an important point before we get further in these phone calls. I don't know. I'm not a Flint resident, but I could just imagine if I am a resident, there's an environmental toxin in my water right now. Who the hell cares what the source is? Just tell the people. Figure out the source, but tell the people right now, don't shower in this water. Don't drink this water. We're investigating what is the source of this Legionella outbreak. But as the health department official Shannon Johnson wrote, it was an outbreak. There was a massive increase in cases. So they had already realized there's something going on, whether it's the Flint River water, whether it's the hospital, whether it's the mailman. Alert the people. Tell the people. Remember how the nation was outraged when they found out that President Trump had spoken with Bob Woodward on the phone in February about coronavirus, acknowledging, yeah, this thing is deadly. It's airborne, Bob. And then he went out in the public and was like, yeah, it's like the flu. Remember how CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times were rightly outraged? That's what was going on here. It was the water instead of coronavirus. Go ahead.
And that's why we in Flint, we're not surprised at the government's failure with COVID and the fact that they went out of their way to cover it up and hide it and downplay it, because that's what's been happening here to us for almost 7 years. So it's the same playbook. I swear to God, like these politicians, have this same gameplay. Like it's the same book. Okay, lie, deny, downplay, dismiss, delay, whatever. And so, we're sitting here in Flint being like, told you so. Not surprised here. You're all Flint. Welcome to Flint, everybody. Sorry.
So I'm winding up the fastball here to get to the core. So after that email where the head of the drinking water office is basically calling the health department, don't publicly announce this. Less than 2 hours later after that email, 6:06 p.m., Nick Lyon, the health director. Nick Lyon is the health director. Well, who wrote that email less than 2 hours earlier? Susan Bohm in the health department. What did she write? I just got a call from the environmental department about the Legionella outbreak. The governor's office is involved. Don't announce it publicly. Nick Lyon calls Dennis Muchmore. This is the 9th call they've had in 2 days. Why is that important? Because the investigators looked at their phone history. Before these 9 calls on October 16th and 17th, they only spoke once. Beginning with a search in 2013, they only spoke once before these 2 days. That was in August, when McLaren Hospital first found Legionella in its system. Here's the 9th call, right after this email about governor's office is involved, don't go to the public about Legionella. They hang up. Dennis Muchmore calls the governor. Criminal investigators saw the entire sequence of calls, coupled with this resulting public silence and denials of any knowledge, as Snyder and his top officials working to stop the news of the Legionella outbreak from emerging. Of the many calls that stood as red flags, the Chief of Staff Muchmore's 2 calls with the Michigan Health and Hospital Association, or MHA, stood out to investigators because of MHA's links to McLaren, the hospital where Legionella bacteria was detected. McLaren Flint was part of MHA's long list of member hospitals. The board of directors for MHA's health pack was chaired by McLaren executive Thomas DeFaw. Gregory Lane, a McLaren Health senior vice president, also sat on the PAC's board. Special prosecutor Flood subpoenaed the Michigan Health and Hospital Association in late 2016 to produce relevant documents pertaining to its communications with the Snyder administration about Legionella. In his petition to subpoena MHA, which was obtained by The Intercept, Flood wrote that MHA joined Snyder and his top officials in keeping the information about the outbreak from the public. Quote, "This evidence shows the governor, his administration, Director Lyon, and the MHA knew about this outbreak of Legionnaires in October 2014 and were interested in keeping the information from going public," Flood wrote in reference to this avalanche of calls. He went on to note that MHA and local water officials at the environmental department, the state environmental department, they held a call on Flint's Legionella outbreak on March 19th, 2015. I don't know, Melissa, why would that be important? If they're holding a call, this Michigan Health and Hospital Association and the Michigan Environmental Department about the Legionella outbreak in March 2015, well, MHA was on the phone with the governor's chief of staff in October 2014, while Legionella was raising alarm bells in the health department, in the environmental department, and now we have evidence MHA was directly holding meetings a few months later with the environmental department. So there you go. MHA was involved, not causing Legionella, but they were involved with the health department in, I don't know, trying to stop it from going public. And that was not my assertion. That was their assertion. I have the quote. Here you go. Flood went on to note that MHA and local water officials at the state environmental department held a call on Flint's Legionella outbreak on March 19th, 2015. Again, nobody has told the public there's a Legionella outbreak yet. The Legionella outbreak started in June 2014. This is March 2015. At the bottom of the meeting update for this call between MHA and the state environmental department, Janice Jones, MHA's office coordinator, shared details of a call she received from state environmental official Carrie Monosmith. Quote, "Carrie has indicated that the Legionnaires outbreak is expected to hit the newspapers in Flint concerning the situation with McLaren, and it is possible that MHA may be called." Flood writes on that, the content of this message conveyed by Ms. Monosmith is very concerning because not only had the outbreak still not been disclosed to the public at this time, but the DEQ was proactively contacting the MHA in the event news, quote, hit the papers. Moreover, Ms. Monosmith was not contacting the MHA, meaning the environmental department was not contacting the MHA to give them a heads up that the state agency, would be alerting the public. Instead, she was issuing this warning because the situation had been intentionally suppressed from the public's knowledge, and the MDEQ was trying to prepare for it getting out. So, Melissa, I don't know. I'm old-fashioned. This is a cover-up. This is a cover-up. They are on the phone, the governor's chief of staff, the governor's health director, this MHA, which is essentially kind of like the cutout. There's two cutouts. Dennis Muchmore, the chief of staff, is the cutout, so Snyder doesn't have to deal directly with the health director. And this Michigan Health and Hospital Association, which is attached at the hip to McLaren Hospital, who has the Legionella outbreak, they're all on the phone together. They're all in meetings, essentially figuring out. Maybe they were trying to figure out how can we solve the Legionella, but it seems first and foremost they're trying to figure out how do we make sure it doesn't reach the public.
Absolutely. And, you know, what's funny is they were meeting in March of 2015. You know what was going on in March of 2015? We had already been marching and protesting and testing the water for anything we could by that time. But March of 2015 is when Flint City Council voted to get off of the Flint River and go back to Detroit, the safe water source we'd had for 50 years. And the emergency manager and Governor Snyder and the Treasury's office turned us down, said it was incomprehensible. It was too expensive to give us clean water. And also, of course, you have the fact that the emergency manager, the previous emergency manager, had sold the connecting pipe that would allow us to go back to Detroit, to Genesee County and Jeff Wright for their own use for them getting clean water because they didn't want to touch the Flint River. So I think it's so funny because, yeah, we were making a lot of noise and, you know, our own city council who we had elected voted unanimously to get off of the Flint River, and the state decided, nah, like within a day, said it's incomprehensible, no way. So then here they are working on this cover up, and probably that vote was turned down to delay and give them more time to fix this story. Now, part of me wonders is did they offer McLaren some kind of deal if they became the patsy and said, yes, okay, we've got Legionnaires, or was McLaren still fighting to say, no, it's not just us? So I would be interested to know how that played out, but it seems like they were all part of the cover up because, again, McLaren was telling their staff, and they said it was coming from high up. They were telling them, do not put, you know, Legionnaires on the, you know, on the death certificate. Don't put it in the medical chart. Treat them at, you know, as if they had Legionnaires or the proper antibiotics, because I believe there's only 3 antibiotics that will help with that, but don't write it down and don't put it on there. Just diagnose it as anything else, you know, bacterial pneumonia, respiratory infection, all that stuff. So it seems like they really weren't fighting to protect themselves hard enough when they were part of the cover up. So I would just like to know, what were our lives worth then to them? You know, to the hospital association, who obviously didn't think it was important to let the, you know, the people of Flint know. And that's been the problem all along with the government. Instead of just telling us, hey, things aren't working out, because again, we failed our first safe drinking water test less than a month after all the water was switched for the cancer-causing disinfection byproducts. And instead of them saying, okay, things aren't working out the way we'd hoped, get some filters, you know, get some bottled water, protect your families, which of course we're going to be angry about that because we pay the highest rates in the United States for this subpar water, this poison. And, you know, we pay 8 times the national average for, you know, garbage. And so, you know, we're going to be upset about that, but at least we would be able to take the protective measures. I could have done my job as a mother and protected my sons from this. I mean, I keep telling people like, yo, I breastfed, and even though like, you know, for as long as I possibly could, even though that was an inconvenience, you know, I made sure my kids didn't have caffeine, make sure that they weren't drinking sugary sodas, because I made sure they drank water. And so I'm a little pissed that, you know, they just were fine with the fact that they were lying to the mothers' faces, the fathers and the grandparents' faces, saying it's fine. But also, here's grandparents and people wanting to take hot showers or soak their aching bones because, by the way, being poisoned hurts, especially when the metals are being stored in your bones and causing arthritis and, you know, crumbling bones. So people wanting to take baths, no, or hot showers. It should have been like, or let people know, turn your water heater up. Please be careful with your small children. Don't scald them, but turn it up so at least it kills the bacteria. Look for this and this. That's their job, and that's what they should have done. The hospital association as well. You know, I mean, you're supposed to be here for the people, not your own asses and not your own contracts. But of course, money over people, and that's what we're dealing with COVID as well, and it's the same thing over and over again. But yeah, they were going out of their way, and I'm sure March 2015 was a flare-up because we were actually getting, by that time, finally getting some national news to pay attention and make us not look like we're just some crazy folks out here not wanting to pay a water bill.
And also, I didn't put it in this story because I didn't have a lot of time. All of this was really about privatizing the water system. There was a super shady financial deal that preceded the water switch. And the reason Flint was on the Flint River in the first place was because of a privatized water pipeline that was completely unnecessary. So there will be more stories about that because I got a whole lot more information that couldn't fit into this one. So, Melissa, we went through the phone calls. That was smoking gun number one. If that wasn't enough, we found another smoking. Well, we didn't find it. The prosecutors found it, but we found out about it because I don't know. I, who don't live in Michigan, I don't live in Flint. Frankly, the local media in Michigan, this was a story of a lifetime. If they would have lifted their fingers, if they would have simply talked to residents, if they would have simply talked to enough residents, you could have built sources and gotten this information. But that would mean they have to care. And if you know anything about the local media in Michigan, if you know anything about the local media anywhere, they're corporate and they don't want to rock the boat. And most of the local media in Michigan have simply regurgitated what Governor Snyder and his administration put out there for the last 5 years, while I dug, and then Jen joined me digging, and Charlie LaDuff, who's a great journalist, dug, and Kayla with PBS dug. That's it. Those are the only real journalists that actually looked into this. Because if you are a journalist, this is not only about Flint, Michigan. It's not just about water. It's about corruption. It's about human rights. It's about the entire country. If what happens in Flint is allowed to stand, it's coming to a theater near you, folks. It's already there. This is happening in a lot of places in a variety of different ways. But the original prosecution, Melissa, they found an in-writing briefing. An in-writing briefing addressed to Governor Snyder that mentioned Legionella in October 2014. In addition to the calls, 5 days earlier, criminal investigators uncovered meeting notes from an October 22nd, 2014 Office of Drinking Water and Municipal Assistance Managers meeting. On October 17th, the head of that office, the head of the Drinking Water Office, Leanne Schechter-Smith, she was the one calling the health department, don't go public, don't announce this. The governor's office had been involved. According to the managers' meeting's notes from October 22nd, they discussed governor's briefings, plural, more than one. Governor's briefings. Here's what they said. Quote, governor's briefings. 2 boil water advisories in Flint lead to all advisories to be sent to the director. Governor's office to be informed of what's happening. Coliform issue led to residual issue. GM now has issue with us with using Flint water and chloride. Genesee County has seen an increase in Legionella. Let me repeat. Genesee County has seen an increase in Legionella. McLaren has detected Legionella. That's 2 mentions of Legionella. Hey, Melissa, who's the governor?
That would be Governor Rick Snyder during that time.
So if there's a briefing addressed to governor's briefings, that would be received by Rick Snyder, who told Congress, I didn't know about Legionella until 16 months later. Why this briefing, besides just the obvious that it's in writing, and this governor, his top officials with this governor told the criminal investigators, this guy's a sponge. He reads everything sent to him. Nothing gets by him. Why is this important? The criminal team asked Dan Wyant, who is the head of the state environmental director, about this briefing. When they asked him about it, he became extremely emotional. Extremely emotional. His face froze, I'm told, by multiple sources, and he was very emotional. He had seen that briefing before, kind of like a shit, we got caught moment. So he saw that briefing that was addressed to the governor that mentioned Legionella. There's a lot more that we discovered that's in that story. But the bottom line is, if you want to just give it a quick summary, the governor, his chief of staff, the health director, this hospital association were on the phone thick as thieves in the middle of October 2014 when Legionella, a deadly waterborne outbreak that by that point they had over 50 cases that year. The normal amount of cases that they had per year was 12 to 15. They had 50 cases, including fatalities. They're on the phone. October 16th, October 17th. Those 2 dates are sandwiched in between emails from the health department. We think it's the Flint water that's causing this. The governor's top environmental advisor, she's sending an email. Please switch Flint back to Detroit. That woman, Valerie Brader, she's sent to the governor's enforcer, Rich Baird, who threatens her, tells her, don't send another email like that. And then you got Snyder, the chief of staff, the health director, all on the phone over 2 days, 9 times between the chief of staff and the health director. 4 of those times, they hang up. Chief of staff right away calls Governor Snyder. Then you have, a few days later, this briefing. So I want to move the ball forward, Melissa. I know this for a fact, the current investigation team that just announced a misdemeanor against Governor Snyder, I know for a fact that they have these phone calls. I know for a fact they know about these phone calls. I know for a fact they know about that briefing. So if they try and come out and say, well, the original team never gave it to us, I know that's not true. And I could prove it's not true. I'm not going to disclose now, but if you're watching, because they might be watching, we know you have this. So they didn't get into details today in their announcement of charges, citing legally we cannot disclose our evidence. Okay, that's fine. But they had this evidence. So eventually they're going to have to explain, why is it that your predecessors, by the way, not that I'm crediting the Republican AG, who I know some things about too, why is it that your predecessor found evidence of misconduct in office, which is a 5-year felony, neglect of duty, which is the misdemeanor. So already they found more than was charged today. And by multiple sources I have, they weren't there yet, but they were building to charge him with involuntary manslaughter, the governor. How is it that they had that, but you could only charge a misdemeanor? Your thoughts?
Well, gee, I mean, especially since they were so against the previous investigative team because he was a Republican, Todd Flood was a Republican. They're like, blah, blah, blah. And then Snyder's the enemy and, blah, 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 blah. We're going to get, and again, the current AG, she campaigned on, I'm going to get justice for Flint. I asked, and again, got yelled at, do they even know what the definition of justice is? Because this ain't it. This is not it. You gave the man a parking ticket for poisoning 100,000 people, damaging their futures, destroying their homes, destroying their businesses, and you get $1,000 fine. Awesome. And excuse me, but my body and my children's bodies, my neighbors' bodies are more than 1 cent. They're worth more than that. And you had no right to levy this kind of garbage when obviously she's had this for years since she got into office. This she had, and she was all gung-ho that she was going to press real charges, and the previous investigation was a mess. Well, if the previous investigation was such a mess, why did they have far more people charged, far more felonies, far more serious cases moving forward to trial? So it's garbage, and I don't want to hear any more excuses because, again, they're supposed to be these career politicians, these career prosecutors that work for the people. And I'm like, yo, I want my taxes back because you ain't doing your job. Because your job would be to hold the people accountable to the same level you would hold me accountable if I poisoned 1 person, let alone 100,000. So here we are. Nope.
Melissa, I want to move on to something that I think is more evidence that the governor was aware of all this, not just aware, but involved with it. And it's evidence that, shocker, we proved, us, with Vice. Today, it wasn't just Governor Snyder charged. There was 8 other officials charged. I want to read to you one official that was charged because I think it's linked to Governor Snyder. Melissa, you know this individual pretty well. His name is Richard Baird. Melissa, could you tell the audience, Richard Baird, how did he identify himself to Flint residents?
Well, he told everybody, well, I'm a Flintstone. My family's originally from Flint, so I care about Flint. And I'm here on behalf of my best friend, college roommate, all this stuff, Rick Snyder. So I'm reaching out to you, and what I have to say and how I'm going to help you is how Rick Snyder is helping you. He sent me here. He trusts me to help take care of you. Yeah, he was very proud to speak for his buddy, Rick Snyder.
Did he ever identify himself that I am here, I am speaking for the governor?
Yes. And a lot of the comments he made, well, Rick and I think this, and Rick and I did this. So it made the two of them sound like this. And of course, we all knew that because, again, I mean, he gave Snyder one of his first jobs out of college, and they've always held hand in hand. And also, Snyder got busted early on because he was paying Rich Baird, not through the government properly. He was paying him through a slush fund, but yet he still had all the governmental access, but yet none of the liability. So when that was exposed, then finally he was like, oh, okay. I hired him as my transition manager for the city of Flint.
Oh, no. It was the transformation manager.
Transformation, that's right. Yeah, we went from not poisoned to poisoned. Awesome transformation. And dead in some cases.
So, by the way, Melissa's not the first person who has said this. Many residents I've spoke to have told me directly, Richard Baird said, I'm speaking for the governor. He knows I'm here. He knows what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Okay? That is very important legally, and I'm about to show you why. Richard Baird was charged today. 1 count of misconduct in office, a 5-year felony. 1 count of perjury, a 15-year felony for lying to investigators. 1 count of obstruction of justice, a 5-year felony, because he tried to basically coach other defendants to get on the same message while talking to the criminal investigators. That was something the original investigators found. Richard Baird was trying to corral all of the state environmental officials, all of the state health officials that were being subpoenaed to do interviews, and get them on message, meaning everybody tell the same story. That was the obstruction of justice, and 1 count of extortion, a 20-year felony. Well, we broke for Vice and then the Metro Times. So basically, between these 4 charges, Richard Baird is, if he's convicted, would die in prison. I don't know how old he is, probably in his 50s or 60s. Serious charges for the governor's right-hand man. So one would have to ask, is Richard Baird the biggest renegade on planet Earth and he's just willy-nilly doing all these things? Or does his best friend, Governor Snyder, know what he's doing? So we reported it for Vice. Melissa, you know this story. We found out because we give a damn and we've gone to Flint. I've gone to Flint 17 times, okay? I just went there during a pandemic. I drove 9 hours straight to Michigan and 9 hours back. So I didn't have to fly. That was my compromise with my wonderful wife. I drove 9 hours there with a bad back and then 9 hours back. So leave a damn super chat, please. Become a member. Statuscoup.com/join, $5. Statuscoup.com/join. So because we'd gone there so much, I met a lot of residents and I've built up relationships. And one of those residents was Christina Murphy. She used to be married to Adam Murphy. And in 2017, Adam Murphy, very sick from the water. He was having seizures, he would be driving and forget how to get back to his house. A shell of himself, just like so many residents. And he went to a Flint town hall and he raised holy fucking hell, like he should. It got a lot of media attention. It was in the Flint Journal, I think in Detroit News. And what did Governor Snyder's team not like? Media attention on Flint's problems. So he's removed from that town hall. This is January 2017. He's removed by a state trooper. He wasn't arrested, but just removed. And that state trooper says, I'm going to try to get you in contact with, somebody in the governor's office. 3 weeks, a month later, who shows up in his living room? Him and Christina were married at the time. Richard Baird, the governor's best friend and right-hand man. Next to him is a former military official, I think an Army colonel or something, and a state trooper. I don't know. Kind of intimidating, wouldn't you think? And Richard Baird tells them, I'm your early Christmas present. The state is going to pay for your treatment, Adam. And Adam has come forward with me. He has told me on the record, so did Christina, we're going to pay for your medical treatment. A very expensive treatment. It's called chelation therapy. It basically extracts lead out of your body, out of your bones. It should have been made available to anybody in Flint who wanted it. We're going to pay for your treatment. We're going to call you, Adam, our pilot program. You're going to be my quote, my lead poster child. Christina and Adam were excited. Wow, the state's helping us. Governor Snyder's helping us. But there's strings attached. You can't tell anyone who's paying for it. And, quiet down. Stop, going nuts at town halls. He didn't say that, but that's kind of, common sense. We're helping you, so can we give it a rest now? I want to show you a clip from Christina Murphy, who was his wife at the time. She came forward very bravely, and I believe one of those charges is because of Christina Murphy coming forward. That they came forward, and that's a huge part, because I know for a fact criminal investigators went to talk to her. So I want to play for you. What did Christina say? Not just about what she said was a payoff, but did Governor Snyder know? Did Governor Snyder know what his best friend Rick Snyder was doing? Let's take a look.
But yeah, no, they just kept giving us the runaround.
In your impression, was Richard Baird there on his own? Or was Governor Snyder aware that his top advisor was meeting with families like yours and making these kind of deals? Did he say anything to you that made you think Governor Snyder knew?
Oh, yeah, definitely. He said he was going to go back to the office and run this by him. I remember that very clearly. I don't know if it got recorded or not. I don't have any, I can't get my hands on the audio, but because you guys did record the meeting. Yeah, we recorded the meeting, and so there is evidence of the meeting if they want to deny it. There's also evidence in my email and evidence in my phone and evidence spread all over the place. So,
And by the way, I just want the audience to know, and then we'll move on to the lead abatement. Attorney General Nessel could say whatever she wants, and her office could say whatever they want, but they know about this because I brought it to them.
Right. Yeah. And so I've spoken to the Attorney General's office about the whole thing, and that's a work in progress, I guess. Yeah. I haven't heard anything.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted the audience to know that he said I don't know if he did tell the governor or he didn't, but it seems kind of far-fetched to believe a top advisor to the governor is going around Flint having these meetings and kind of by everything I've heard, making offers to pay off very loud residents without the governor knowing.
No, the governor knew, because he wouldn't say the governor is my best friend since grade school, and I'm here. I don't want to second guess myself, but I know that he said he was going back to run this by Snyder, but I don't remember when he came in the door if he said, I'm here on the behalf of Snyder.
Right.
But I know when he left, he said, I'm bringing this to Snyder and see if I can get this pilot program going.
And didn't he describe to you, how did he describe Snyder?
As his best friend.
Okay.
If I may.
Sound familiar, Melissa?
Very. I was at their house. When they told me like this meeting was going to happen, I made sure that they had their recording software set up and make sure their computer, their phone, all that stuff was going to be able to pick it up. And I told them, I begged them not to sign anything or agree to anything until they had all the details and to have an attorney there present. But apparently that wasn't allowed, which is a red flag. But then they were so sad and desperate. I mean, her son was born with high lead levels in his blood, and they were proof that the lead would transfer from the mother to the baby in utero. I mean, that family had been put through hell, and all they wanted to do was help everybody else. So Baird used their own compassion against them, because we had been demanding and begging for chelation therapy along with a lot of other things, and they used it against them, and then they lied to them. They lied, and of course now they feel guilty, and then they feel bad about all this. I mean, hell, like after Adam was going through the chelation therapy, his family was supposed to be next. They didn't even help his own family, so they hung them out to dry, and that does a lot to a person. And unfortunately, the two of them have since divorced, because this was more than anyone should be expected to handle.
So I think this is super important, because this is not an isolated incident. Melissa, I know you've said this already. Let's say it again. They're not the only people that Richard Baird offered. You call it what you want, payoffs, Christmas presents, special deals. I know that they did it to two other people, other than you, and these were loud Flint activists rallying people up, going to the media. It's a time-tested divide and conquer strategy. Richard Baird in 2018, you were in a meeting with Richard Baird. Your lawyers were present. Did he identify himself? I'm here on behalf of Governor Snyder.
Absolutely. We were having a status meeting in Detroit about basically the state trying to get out of their agreement to replace our lead and galvanized steel service lines. And they didn't want to do independent monitoring, and the person that they had picked was absolutely not independent. That's a whole other story in of itself. And as we're sitting there, Baird is getting angrier and angrier, and it's a long table. So imagine your stereotypical government office. It's got a cooler at the end of it full of Nestle water bottles that none of us took. And on one side is all the state's attorneys, including Snyder's attorneys and the Department of Environmental Quality's attorneys, as well as the representatives. And on the other side is myself, Pastor Overton, who is also a named plaintiff in the Safe Drinking Water Act case, and our attorneys from the Natural Resources Defense Council and ACLU of Michigan. So there's a lot of people in this room along this long table. Well, Baird comes into the meeting late and then plops down. And as time's going on, he's basically getting angry and irritated because people like me don't just say, yes, sir, whatever you want, sir. That's fine. Go ahead and continue to kill me, sir. And so I was talking to him about the testing and how important it was. And he got mad. And then he decided to brag about the fact that he was like, you know what? The residents of Flint just aren't grateful enough for what, Rick and I, meaning Rick Snyder, have done for you guys. You guys just don't appreciate anything. He was like, we didn't have to keep the points of distribution, the pods where you could pick up bottled water. We didn't have to keep them open as long as we did. And like, actually, yes, you did, because we forced you to with the lawsuit. But okay, different story. But he was like, we didn't have to do anything for you guys. I'm like, yeah. And he was like, and you guys just aren't grateful enough. I was like, oh, so how grateful are we supposed to be for you poisoning us? And he was like, well, that is exactly why I pulled the, water bill credits. They were giving us a percentage off our expensive water bills because they said we could still safely flush the toilet. But let's remember, if water's corrosive coming in, it's also corrosive going back out. So that's fine. But that idiocracy aside, the next thing is, he said, and because you guys weren't appreciative enough of what we were doing for you, what Rick and I have done for you, he said, that's why I decided to get rid of the water pods, the points of distribution sites. And he said, you know what? I'll tell you this. He was like, Rick and I are out at the end of this year, so we can't be bothered with this. We couldn't care less, basically. And I was like, you just said that to our face. But then it got funnier. I said, well, that's interesting. You're talking about the gratitude we should have. And then I said, why don't you go ahead and come to my house and shower with the acid coming out of my shower head faucet? I'm open anytime. And he got mad. And when he gets mad, he gets red in his neck and his ears, which then I know I'm doing a good job. And he leaned forward and he was like, well, how about if I personally come to your house and pay to have all of your interior plumbing, your appliances, your water heater, your faucets, and your service line replaced out of my pocket? And he's like, then will that make you happy? Then will that make you be quiet? And I sat there and I was like, well, that's interesting. You just offered to bribe me in front of all of my attorneys and yours, which, by the way, it looked like they were going to pass out. And I looked at him and said, well, that sounds great, but only if you do this for every single household in this city. Obviously, the answer was no.
Can I ask you just straight up? Is there any way that Richard Baird was doing these things without Governor Snyder knowing?
God, no, absolutely not. He went, I mean, he spoke at, at the town hall meetings, we used to have these like bi-weekly update status meetings about the water crisis, the continuum of care and this team that was supposed to be part of the recovery. He was the one, because Snyder wouldn't show his face to Flint residents until Obama made him show his face, and he got booed off the stage for 2 minutes, after 2 minutes. But I mean, other than that, he refused to come in front of the residents. So Baird is who he sent to speak for him. And it was very, very clear that he was speaking for, and again, he's not going to be able to make these deals and get this money from, the state government without Snyder's say. Because again, he's one tough nerd, and he decided that he has to control everything, which that also means the guy that's doing the, bribe attempts for you. So yeah, I mean, it was very clear. And again, he just kept saying, Rick and I this. And I'm like, keep saying that, buddy. Good to know. My attorneys are right here.
I'm not asking you to pretend to be a lawyer, but I am asking you just from a common sense perspective. If you have like several examples of the governor's lieutenant in the mafia, we call this the consigliere, basically paying off sick people, threatening sick people. He also threatened a Wayne State researcher who was researching what was the source of the Legionella outbreak.
Right.
When that researcher was starting to find evidence that it was the Flint River switch, he threatened him, we're going to pull your funding if you don't, quote, get on message. That ain't my opinion. That's Sean McElberry. He's the professor. He's the engineering professor who said so, that Richard Baird threatened him. So if Richard Baird is being charged with misconduct in office, 5-year felony, 1 count of perjury, 15-year felony, 1 count of obstruction of justice, 5-year felony, 1 count of extortion, 20-year felony, then you have residents saying, yeah, the governor knew what he was doing because Richard Baird told me that the governor knew. So I'm asking this not as somebody who, I just want justice. I just want the truth. But how is it that one prosecution team found evidence for misconduct in office, found evidence for negligence, and were 75% towards ready to go, almost had enough evidence for involuntary manslaughter. But this investigation, who, by the way, for those that don't know, Attorney General Nessel started basically shitting on the investigation that preceded her before she even got into office, before she even saw one document, before she even saw one piece of anything. In the media, she was basically signaling, I'm going to clean house. And you know what happened when she did that? The defendants that were cooperating with the prosecution, they stopped cooperating because they were waiting to see, well, just, she might win. So why are we going to prosecute with this team and these investigators if she's basically crapping on their work and she's probably going to fire them? They stopped cooperating. What does cooperation and investigation mean? They're giving other people higher on the totem pole. So it seems to me, Melissa, I'm not a Flint resident, so I'm not going to speak that I'm outraged. I mean, I'm not a resident. But what really needs to be explained, I think, the people of Flint are owed an explanation. Did you only charge a misdemeanor because that's the only thing you think is slam dunk to get a conviction? Did you only charge a misdemeanor because that's all you could find? Because it seems to me they think, just my opinion, they took the easy way here. They took what they thought there was a 90% chance to convict. But the problem is, if you convict Governor Rick Snyder of this, you'll be lucky if he gets 6 months in a jail. I mean, he's not going to spend a year in jail. That just doesn't happen with rich white people. And if it does, it's the Jeffrey Epstein situation, which is a bed and breakfast, when he gets to leave the jail to go to his office all day. This is happening in America. So I would really, they don't like me because they've already kind of indirectly threatened me from my last story. But I would like to know, how is it it's not just me reporting this. Charlie LaDuff is independently confirming, yeah, the original team was going for involuntary manslaughter. Kayla with PBS, the original team was going for involuntary manslaughter and already had misconduct in office, but you fired them. So I don't know. I know that there's a pandemic. I know that there's a lunatic white supremacist attacking the Capitol, but and let's not mention there's also a pending settlement. But what do the Flint residents want? I know you don't speak for all residents, but should these investigators, should these prosecutors explain why is the governor of Michigan getting a misdemeanor when his right-hand man is being charged with extortion, perjury, obstruction of justice, misconduct in office? I spoke with someone, Melissa, who said, well, maybe they're throwing the book at his right-hand man, hoping that the right-hand man will flip on the governor. Well, if the right-hand man was going to flip on the governor, it would have happened by now.
Right. I mean, and that's not even it, because if they have enough proof, which by the way, I'm fairly certain the proof was the only reason this man got charged with these certain things is because of your story that came out in April. And of course they never commented on it, didn't do anything about it. So now, Rich Baird's walking around with these heavy duty charges, which are valid. He's the right-hand man of the guy who is the head guy. This man, Governor Rick Snyder, took control, overrode what the elected, the people said in the ballot box. He overrode the votes of the people and our elected official to steal our democracy here in Flint, to steal our voice, to make all of the decisions about what happens in Flint. And with him being a nerd, he's educated and knows everything about it. But then is like, people are dying. Not it. And I think it would be hilarious if he let Rich Baird burn, good. And, if Baird was gonna and if honestly too, and if Baird actually thought he was gonna serve any kind of time, he probably would turn on Snyder. But I even doubt that, because the two of them have been like this since college, and they've had each other's backs, lied for each other, covered up, went out of their way. I mean, Baird went out of his way to cover up for what his buddy was doing. And, Rick had his hand in everything, and you can't play stupid when you have literally titled yourself the dictator over Flint and several black cities, and then saying you're a one tough nerd and I'm fixing all this and blah, 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 when people are dying. People are dying and you knew it and you covered it up, and you have only yourself to blame, since you put yourself at the head of the table and you're the only voice there. Whether Rich Baird did your dirty work or not, you had to give him the instructions. He didn't just run around all crazy by himself offering up these deals. I mean, God, they even asked me, they're like, what would it take for you to trust your water? And then since you're such a vocal person and people trust you, what would it take for you to tell your friends and neighbors and the public that they can trust their water as well? Oh, okay. All right. So what is that? Nothing. And it's happened. God, I was offered a free service line if I would be part of the recall against the former mayor, Karen Weaver, the only one that stood up against Governor Snyder and who demanded Flint get more resources. And Governor Snyder told her to her face, get over it. I don't want to talk about Flint water anymore.
And I want to be clear, because it's very possible somebody's watching me from the Attorney General's office, because that's how these things work. They kind of follow your Twitter and they follow whatever. I want to be fair. They said at the end of this press conference, this is an ongoing investigation. If there's new evidence that comes out, there might be more charges for these defendants. There might be more there might be more people charged. Well, here's some evidence. I just broke it in the Intercept. Jen and I just broke it. You have the evidence. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I know a lot of lawyers. I've spoken with two today who are baffled and said, the only reason you would charge this man with a misdemeanor is because it's political, and it's higher than them. It's higher than them. And that's why they're only charging him with the misdemeanor. There's already Republicans in the media and others saying this is reckless. This is going to give any public official pause and make them second guess their decision making. Good.
Yeah.
Yes. Second guess your decision making when it comes to people's lives. That's the point, that you don't have blanket immunity as a governor or as anybody. If there's bacteria, if it's water, that children are drinking, that anybody's drinking. And so in fairness, we'd love to see if you have more charges. But I will say, I mean, let's see the response today. This gave me a tickle. The final reporter asked a question about our story because none of the other media seems to have read it. And I know you've gotten some messages privately from some reporters that have read it, but can't be bothered to cover it. Let's take a look at what when a reporter asked them about, there's this place called The Intercept, and they're saying this. Let's take a look.
All right, the last question will be from Stephanie Parkinson. She is asking, a publication called The Intercept claims the AG's office has evidence that should bring charges of misconduct in office for former Governor Snyder. Is there any validity to that claim?
Again, like we've stated before, we followed the evidence in this case.
Oh my God.
Asked for indictments on that evidence in court. And other than that, I can't comment on anything else that came out during the grand jury testimony.
So, first of all, I love how they say there's this publication, The Intercept. I mean, I'm not a full-time employee for The Intercept, but it's fairly well known. I appreciate, by the way, The Intercept doing this with Jen and I. First of all, The Intercept isn't claiming this. We are reporting this.
Right.
It's a fact. We have multiple sources and documentation that the original prosecution found evidence to charge Governor Snyder with misconduct in office. That questioner didn't reference this. We also have multiple sources, not named the janitor, that they were 75% of the way to charging him with involuntary manslaughter, which is a up to 15-year felony. So that was the Solicitor General. I've met her before. When she says they followed the evidence, I get it. Legally, they're saying we cannot discuss it at this point. It will be introduced as it goes forward. But my strong assumption, they're not presenting those phone calls as evidence. My strong assumption is they're probably not going to present that briefing as evidence. I also have questions on why was there no charges for Governor Snyder's chief of staff, who is all over those phone calls. And by the way, if you're watching Mr. Muchmore, I have more of your phone calls that are not in this story. So stay tuned for that. Where is the charges against the head of the environmental department, Dan Wyant, who became very emotional when the investigators presented him with this governor's briefing that said Legionella? And I reported in that story, Dan Wyant, at the end of October 2014, Melissa, you didn't know this, he met with City of Flint officials and they talked at a meeting about Legionella a few days before Governor Snyder's reelection. So the environmental department director knew there was an outbreak. Who does the environmental department director report to, Melissa?
That would be, the governor.
So
the nerd.
Again, I know that journalists are supposed to be neutral robots and have no opinion. Here's my opinion. I have facts, and based off those facts, I do have an opinion. And my opinion is this. We're going on 7 years, okay? And I'm not saying Flint is the only story in America. I'm not saying Flint is the only place with poisoning. But I will say this. Most poisonings are not acute. They happen over time. Libby, Montana was acute. It was an asbestos crisis. You know the difference between Flint and Libby, Montana? Libby, Montana is 96% white. And Libby, Montana, through Obamacare, got Medicare for all for its citizens. Flint, Michigan, let me not speak for Flint. Melissa, what is Flint?
Flint is more than half. It's actually half African-American, and also we're a majority brown and black city with a lot of immigrants. And what's funny also, during the time of, when there was we had Syrian refugees, Snyder actually collected federal funds to bring the Syrian refugees to Michigan and get them housed to, for asylum, all that great stuff. He put them in Flint in the middle of a water crisis that he knew was killing people and gave them nothing to warn them in their language. So extra murder there as well. But that was intentional. So yeah, we're a majority minority city. We, I believe, are still, we have the highest poverty level in the country and the highest poverty level for children in the United States. And we've been begging for Medicare for all, like Libby, Montana. We've been demanding to not have to pay poison water bills because consumers usually don't have to pay for poison products. And we've been demanding that they replace all of the things they broke, meaning the infrastructure in the streets, in our homes, and also how about our bodies, and provide us with health care, chelation therapy for the people who actually are able to go through with it. And I don't know, set the guilty people in jail so that way when we say Flint Lives Matter, that they actually do. So yeah, we don't get this because we're poor, majority, minority. I mean, hell, they were surprised that we even bothered to fight back because the Flint water crisis joined people. Like, I mean, I was a music promoter. I mean, band manager. I was in PR and marketing, for God's sake. A much more fun life. And we joined across geographic lines, economic lines, racial lines, education lines, all of those things to fight back. And in the words of the great Claire McClinton, who is an organizer here in Flint, they poisoned the wrong city. And yeah, so we've been fighting, and it's been, raising the alarms for cities all across the country. But here's the problem. Well, a lot of cities are getting fixed faster than us. So, I mean, we're happy for them. But also, if Flint goes unfixed and people do not get punished properly, we are not made whole, and that justice is not found in Flint, with all of the attention and everything and all the facts right in front of them, the next city who gets poisoned for profit is going to go through the same thing, except it's going to be a hell of a lot easier to hide it. And it's going to be a hell of a lot easier to get it through, since people have, apparently in the media, have Flint fatigue. Try living here. And nobody seems to care about what happens to little old Flint, or they just assume we're fixed since, mainstream media has, left us, unless something happens here and there or whatever. But yeah, that's the biggest thing. And also that should answer the question people have asked, like, why don't you move? One, it's my house and I didn't poison my shit. Two, if we leave, they win. They get what they want. They get to gentrify and move us out. But also, I've traveled all over North America to help other cities organize with their water contamination and water quality and water access issues. I don't know where I would even move, that where I could find a place that is already becoming Flint, or they have the laws on the books, because the emergency manager law that allowed these, this person to take over our city is on the books in 37 different states. So if you're not Flint yet, you could be well on your way. And why would I want to leave the devil I know, I guess, to go to a new one? But no, we have to stay here and fix what was done to Flint. So that way the proper fix will be replicated, and not the poisoning and being left for dead.
And by the way, let's say you wanted to move. Who the hell's going to buy your house?
Yeah, I could put a listing up and be like, well, we've had to gut my kitchen because the water ate through some of the fixtures, and we had leaks we didn't realize that warped the floors in my 110-year-old house. We had to take out all the cabinets and all that stuff, and we're still not done because, COVID got me and stuff like that. And so I'm sorry I keep itching. I just had a heart monitor implanted yesterday, and it's bugging me. But the thing is that I don't see realtors going out there being like, hey, why don't you come buy this house? It poisoned my family. It'll be good fun for you too. You can learn how to use bottled water for everything and try to have some kind of dignity with it.
I want to ask you a few lightning round questions because I know you got to go. First of all, I think this is extremely important because the media keeps pushing this bullshit propaganda. They keep talking that the water's safe. Now it's just a trust issue. Now it's just your mayor, by the way, keeps pushing this. No, the water's meeting regulations. It's safe again, but it's a trust issue. We need to regain trust. Melissa, is the water safe? And when I ask that, are people still in Flint getting rashes? Are people still losing hair when they shower? Are people still experiencing burning when they shower? Are people still smelling smelly water? Are people still seeing discolored water?
No, the water is not safe. Why? Well, this goes into the narrative of blaming the victim. They're like, oh, they're too stupid to realize the water's fine. First of all, no level of lead is safe. And they're saying that if it's under 15 parts per billion, you're fine. No, That's not safe at all. It's a neurotoxin, 0. And let's see, common sense, I don't have to have a PhD, but common sense says this water that you're piping through is going through distribution mains in the streets from the city system through pipes that are corroded, rupturing, damage, and contaminating the water. And even if we do get a new service line connected to our house, the appliances and plumbing and all that great, expensive, wonderful stuff that I own is also corroded. So yeah, as long as bad metal pipes are in the ground and in our homes and the water's touching it, it's bad. So I would love to slap these people who keep saying that. And let me just say also, my cardiologist yesterday told me to not shower in the Flint water because I could get bacteria and chemicals in my incision for my, implanted heart monitor. So that's interesting. Yeah, because otherwise, when I turn on the shower, and I'm not the only one, it burns my eyes. The fumes are huge. We got to open the window no matter how cold it is. We got to make sure that the exhaust fan is running. And people are still losing hair, still getting rashes, still getting their skin tore up, especially with the additional hand washing required for, staying safe in a pandemic. And, yeah, and everybody still has to pay for bottled water. And, on top of our very expensive water bills, which is what I was looking at before I logged on. I'm like, oh, that's cool. So I got to pay another $275. 1 month, people. So yeah, we pay $275 and then have to buy bottled water because even if we don't have PhDs, my skin's bubbling up, my kids are getting rashes, my hair's still falling out, and my cardiologist says, do not get Flint water on your wound. So kind of important there. And yeah, also when the same people who poisoned us and are covered it up are telling you that, oh, hey, everything's fine now. You think you should believe them because, oh yeah, they got busted lying before. And again, if I go shoot somebody and then I tell you that I blew the guy's head off, but he's fine, he's gonna get up walking around, why would you listen to me? I'm the criminal who did this. So yeah, that's exactly what the problem is. But then again, the state's got lots of wonderful PR machines that my taxes pay for. But yeah, it's been great. It's basically been wonderful to pay for poison and pay for bottled water so companies like Nestle can get rich off of our poisoning. So I'm sorry that wasn't a short answer.
Second lightning round. I don't know. Let's assume they are watching. What is your message to Attorney General Dana Nessel, her team, that today announced the charge against Governor Snyder is neglect of duty, 2 counts of neglect of duty, which is up to a year in jail, year in prison, and $1,000 fine, if he's convicted, that is.
My life, my children's lives, my neighbors' lives are worth more than 1 single penny. 1 cent is what you're fining this man for being in charge and orchestrating the poisoning, death, destruction, and absolute traumatization that you're okay with them putting us through. You're letting a guilty man walk like basically free with a jaywalking ticket. And why? But what I want to hear is I don't want to hear a press statement. I want you to come to my face, to my house, to the people who have lost their loved ones. And I want you to explain to me, to my face, why my sons are only worth 1 penny. And I want a reason. And I hope to God, whichever God you serve, I hope that this is just the start. Because if this is all that's happening after all you've put us through the 19 months of silence since you threw away our process of justice and us actually seeing some justice, you best have a good reason and be ready for it. And you need to face us. You need to face us and tell us to our face as to why this is all it's going to be. But my advice, because we in Flint are fed up, and we've been fed up for quite some time. We're sick, we're tired, we don't really have a lot to lose because everything's been stolen from us anyway. How about you just get back to work? How about you look at the evidence that you had in front of you the entire time? Or that, that Jordan decided to hand in a gift box to you and rethink the charges for the people that you're letting walk away.
And my last question, and we're going to take this federal now. I don't know. I know my Constitution and I know the law federally. Rick Snyder told Congress that he didn't know about Legionella till January 2016. Our reporting is airtight, and the original prosecution, he knew about it 16 months earlier. So that would be perjury in front of Congress. I believe there's something called the Federal Department of Justice. I believe there's something called the House Oversight Committee. Mm-hmm. I know that Elijah Cummings, before he passed, wanted to bring Rick Snyder back. So Joe Biden, he said a lot of words when he ran for president about black and brown people, about poor people, about Build Back Better, about, let's return the soul of the nation. Well, he's coming in. The Democrats are going to have the House. The Democrats are going to have the Senate. The Democrats control the Oversight Committee. The Democrats will control the Department of Justice. So there's nothing stopping Joe Biden. There's nothing stopping the Department of Justice. There's nothing stopping the House Oversight Committee from taking their own investigations and actions into Governor Snyder. I don't know. I know what state statute of limitations are, but I believe federally there's still a window here. What would be your message to Joe Biden? I know that he loves working across the aisle with Republicans here. What would be your message to Joe Biden and the Democrats who there's no excuses. They control the Senate, they control the House and the White House and the Department of Justice.
Number one, honor the memory and the legacy of Elijah Cummings and get Snyder back in front of Congress since he perjured himself. And Elijah Cummings knew it, and that's what he was fighting for when he died, unfortunately. Number two, how in the hell are you supposed to call it Build Back Better if Flint's still poisoned, which happened under your watch? Again, the state did what they did, but the year that y'all left office, we got poisoned. We made it very clear. You guys declared a state of emergency. So you knew it was a problem then, and it's still going on. So how about you reach across them aisles, do whatever it is you need to do, and get us some damn funding so that way we can live safely in our homes, especially if you want our votes and our tax dollars. Also, number three, Joe Biden needs to apologize for not just accepting former Governor Snyder's support and his endorsement, but the fact that you publicly thanked him for his endorsement. And I get it that, it's important that Dems and the GOP, they go hand in hand and blah, 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 blah. Really, you literally accepted the endorsement from a man who's responsible for the death and destruction, and not just of Flint. I mean, he destroyed Detroit as well, and Benton Harbor. But that's okay because they're black cities. I get it. They're black and poor cities. So it's not like you care, but you should start to care because we're loud. Also, and for people who are asking about Michael Moore, we caught flack. I've gotten it twice. Once with Jen on Status Quo, when I said, the Republicans, they're the ones that set this in motion. They're the ones that poisoned us. But at least they made it clear, saying, hey, we hate poor black and brown people. So here's your poisoning. Suck it up and enjoy. But then the Democrats come along and start making all these promises saying, oh, we're going to get you justice. And the Attorney General Nessel, she's one of them. Justice for Flint. Come give me a hug with this knife in your back. And then they're like, oh, well, we can't do anything. Walking away now. Just hang in there. Good luck. And then absolutely ignore us past then. So I don't want to hear anything about this, trying to work together, blah, 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 or it's just a Republican problem, or it's a human rights problem, not a political problem. So get your political asses in there and fix a human rights problem. And it's not just a problem. It is genocide. It is murder. It is wiping out and gentrifying a historical city. And not that you care, but just remember, part of our history has to do with the sit-down strikes and fighting for the housing rights. We do a lot of cool stuff here in Flint, and we are worth saving. So stop trying to treat us like a disposable person. And for people who are asking about Michael Moore, there was a very interesting. So I caught a lot of flack, which I enjoyed with Jen's interview, but also Michael Moore and I did a podcast, and we talked about, Jordan and Jen's stories, especially exposing what we've continued to find, and the big FU that Joe Biden gave to Flint when he took Snyder's endorsement and then also thanked him publicly about it. So Joe Biden's got a lot to make up for. And we need Medicare for all. We need all the infrastructure. We need the Army Corps of Engineers to get in here and rip all these tainted pipes up so we can maybe not get, killed by the water we're paying the highest rates in the United States for. And maybe we can drink out of our tap safely and stop making these bottled water companies rich off of our poisoning. And how about we start working on changing some of them laws and those loopholes that allowed Flint to happen in the first place so it doesn't keep happening. So there's a few things I'd like to say, but that's one of them. Fix this.
And by the way, for those asking if I've reached out to Michael Moore, I think I've courted Michael Moore more than any woman I have ever courted in my life, including my wife. Michael Moore, nothing bad to say. It's been a challenge to get Michael Moore to share this stuff. And, to be honest, he's a bit older now. Busy guy. I know that, he's slowing down a bit. So this is not attacking him, but I really hope, I just don't know if he knows about it, to be honest with you. I've interviewed him once, but I don't have, I'm not on his speed dial. So I would really encourage you, tweet at him, do anything you can to get this man's attention. Flint. Flint on Twitter, because the bottom line is it's sad, but if Flint raises hell, this will go national. That's just how it is.
And January of 2016, he came to Flint and was demanding, and he was the only one, he was demanding that Snyder be arrested. So this means, he needs to be able to read this. He needs to be able to see it and read it and look at the evidence right in front of him. So yeah, ask him to look, because it's exactly what he's been trying to do, is push for Snyder's arrest. And he very much despises that man. So we just need to make sure it cuts through all of the impeachment stuff and all of the COVID stuff and all the everything. We need to make sure this gets through to him so he can have it in his hands and help us out. So,
by the way, that's a good segue, and I'll let you go after this. Why do you think it is that they announced this now?
Well, now is a beautiful time to bury some BS story. And if you're going to do some weak charges that are just basically fake for publicity, but you don't really want people to look into it, you want to seem like you're doing something for the residents of Flint, now is a good time to bury that, because, our country is imploding and, COVID's still killing people at a fast and unimaginable rate. We've got psychos storming the Capitol. I mean, there's lots of news going on. So sliding this in right now would be a perfect time if you didn't want anybody to dig into it. But what's hilarious is they had no idea that you and Jen were already working on breaking a massive story, and the timing couldn't have been any better. So,
and just so people know the behind the scenes, some of this, Melissa. So this story was not ready. We were going to do it probably at the end of January, and it was going to be significantly longer. Mm-hmm. But we got, I had a suspicion they were going to announce the charges before Biden's inauguration. I figured, all right, the Capitol just got attacked. There was an insurrection attempt. Maybe they'll delay a little bit. So I have a little bit more time. You could ask my wife, and Melissa, you know this. You're not my wife, but you know this. I have been working on this 16, 17 hours a day, probably for 2 months, including the drive back and forth. Right. My wife is, I would put her name on it because she deserves credit. She has had no time with me, and I have not been a great husband because all I've been doing is working on this story, which included, you don't know how many documents I've had to read. You don't know how many sources I've had to call while doing a live stream every day. But when on Tuesday they leaked that Snyder was going to be charged, not what the charges were, he was going to be charged. I said to The Intercept, we got to do this tomorrow, or I just got to do it myself. So to The Intercept's credit, we crammed in a day, and we got this out. And there, the bottom line is, when you're doing a story like this, there's legal ramifications. You gotta make sure everything's correct, protect sources. So we got it out. But I said to The Intercept, and Melissa, you would know this. I said to The Intercept, I don't want to reach out to them, the Attorney General, until like half hour before. Because if I give them enough notice, they're going to leak what the charges are, because they want to bury this story. Because we didn't know what the charges were yet. So I reach out. The Intercept wanted me to give them, at least an hour notice for comment. I reach out, and I knew this was going to happen. I reach out. 20 minutes later, it's leaked what the charges are. So they did that on purpose. So, all the news would pick up what the charges are instead of the bombshell that, oh, wait, the previous investigators were going for involuntary manslaughter. Melissa, thank you very much.
Anytime.
You've taken
thank you
so much time. And keep fighting. I don't think people realize that, we're so focused. I haven't been, but the nation and the media have been so focused on this Trump reality show for 5 years that I don't really think people realize that, this is a This is an episode of The Walking Dead, Flint. I don't mean any disrespect,
No,
but if you go to Flint,
I look like hell. I got,
if you go to Flint, it'll take you. I mean, you don't even need to be there for more than 20 minutes. This is a disaster zone. It is a disaster zone still, nearly 7 years later. I have met people that 5 years ago when I met them in their 30s looked fine. Not they were sick, but they looked fine. I see them now. They look like they're in their 80s and they're still in their 30s. Again, I don't mean disrespect. I mean lead poisoning, heavy metal poisoning, bacterial contamination, PFAS, cancer-causing toxins that were in that water. God knows what else was in that water. It just came out. That they were dumping, what was it, fracking?
Toxic waste. Fracking and toxic waste. Yes, we were drinking fracking waste on top of everything else in this lovely sewer sandwich we were being served up. And they didn't bother to tell us until 5 years later. So
why I'm saying this, it's actually, we just use Flint water crisis just kind of as the name. It's actually a crisis. Like, i.e., when you think of a crisis, like, holy shit, the Capitol just got stormed. This is still a crisis. People are still dying. People are still very sick. People don't have health care in Flint. They are super more susceptible than anyone else. Maybe Native Americans, because they've been poisoned for 500 years.
Right.
But they, not just older people, all ages are uniquely susceptible to the coronavirus because they were made sick for 18 months. So it's not a hashtag. It's an active crisis, and it's no longer treated that way. President Obama went to Flint the final days for Biden. He acted like nothing was still going on. I just went there. People are dying. People are still sick. I don't want to blow up your spot, Melissa, but how much have you spent just on medical bills for yourself and your kids?
Doing taxes has been fun because the year before I spent over $10,000 because the dental problems with the teeth falling out of my mouth. X-rays were over $10,000. Well, for my rheumatologist because I've got bone spurs and degenerating spine and neck because lead's absorbed easier by your bones than calcium. So we got that fun stuff. And I don't get sick leave or anything like that. And we're constantly sick, so I don't even know what. But so thousands upon thousands of dollars we don't have to rebuild our home, to try to get filtration systems that might make it safer to live in this prison. And to hear people say it's safe. I went off on a Lansing reporter the other night. I mean, I was a little tired, but she was like, well, now since your water's safe, what do you think? And I just ran it over. I'm like, you don't even have to look at the science. It's common sense. The things are broken. The things are broken. That's the only way to fix it, to make our water safe, is to fix it. And don't even talk about trust for Flint until you earn it, which you have done nothing to earn it. Continuing to lie, exactly that same lie, blaming the victim, saying, well, they're just scared of the water. Oh, you want to talk about who should be scared of what? You should be scared of a whole bunch of Flint residents that are tired, fed up, zombies with nothing else to lose, because come on. So people need to start doing right by us. And also, with every bone in our body, we are also fighting to make sure this doesn't happen to you, to make sure it doesn't happen to your family. We are fighting to change laws on the state and federal level so you don't have to end up like us. And we're trying to stop our own poisoning, but also fighting for you guys as well. So please don't forget about Flint, please.
And by the way, I know I lied, Melissa, one more thing. This isn't just a Republican thing, but Flint happened for two reasons. Rick Snyder said he wanted to run government like a business.
Oh, yeah.
This is what happens when you run government like a business. This is what happens when you view human beings as little checks on the balance sheet. This is what happens when you try and make money. This was a privatization scheme, which was not in my story. This is what happens when either you're a Democrat, Republican, whatever, that you run government like a business. Larry, my father, if you're watching, this is what happens when you run government as a business. I know for a fact. Do you know that Rick Snyder, when the matter of gay marriage came in front of him in Michigan, he didn't worry about whether it was ethical or not. He said, what would it do for taxes? This is what happens when you run government like a business. That's number one. Number two, this is what happens when very wealthy people are the predominant rulers of our government. Because when Rick Snyder made a whole lot of money as a computer executive, okay, he's a millionaire. When wealthy white people are predominantly running our government, running our media, by the way, they don't give a fly. Yeah, all right, let's roll the dice. See if, all right, you don't want to add the proper chemicals to the water to save money. Oh, you want to, the water plant isn't ready yet to treat the water. It'll be fine. Let me tell you something. They would not do that to Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is wealthy white. They would not do that to Benton Harbor. You finished, Melissa.
Yeah, and what's funny, let's just keep in mind that Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is a wealthy white college town, is where Governor Snyder has one of his residences. When the Flint water crisis busted out, they removed all of their 110 lead pipes before one single lead pipe was removed in Flint. Interesting. They didn't even have a lead problem, but that's the way that it is. If Flint would have been predominantly white and wealthy, and not to mention, we do have rich areas of town, the Miller Road mansions, and they got just as poisoned as the rest of us. But if this would have been a wealthy white community, this never would have happened. They never would have been like, let's put them on this experimental river. Let's put them on this subpar thing while we privatize the water and get this new pipeline going. No, never would have happened. They would have been like, oh no, I'm gonna take away my donations dollars, so you're never gonna be able to do this. And what happened was, they're dumb, they're poor, they're black, they're brown. Who's going to care about them? Flint's not a community, and I quote, that we want to go out on a limb for. So what then smacked them in the ass is that they didn't realize that we actually have some fight in us. And so another part of this is, if this would have happened in a wealthy white community, which of course it wouldn't, but if it would have, they wouldn't have known what to do and how to fight back. They would have just thrown money at the problem instead of actually fighting to fix the problem. So they wouldn't know. It takes people like us, regular people that have had to fight for every single thing our entire lives, to be able to fight back. And that is why we need regular people like all of us to be in office. We need the rich white people to have their old butts out of those chairs, because they obviously aren't doing anything for the rest of us. And we need regular people in there, because regular people can learn the laws. We can learn how to do this, but also we got human decency. And we know that our job is to support our constituents. We know that human lives matter, because as of right now, when governments run like a business, when water's treated like a commodity, which by the way, it just started being traded on the stock market, people die. So there's that. And I don't want you to become one of them people. So get your butts in office and fight for all the rest of us.
Melissa, thank you so much.
No problem.
All right.
Thank
Talk
you.
to you soon. Bye. So that was Melissa Mays. I don't know what happened to my green screen, but whatever. I got a few things to say before we wrap this party up. I got a few things to say before we wrap this party up. Number one, there's 500 people watching, I think, and this is my green screen. I really don't know why my graphic went away. Hold on, let me see if I could get it back. We got settings, green screen. Yeah, right there. An error occurred trying to create the green screen. An error occurred trying to create the green screen. All right, whatever. You'll just have to see me with my green screen. This investigative reporting that Jen and I are doing, you might say, well, Jordan, like we love you, we want to support you, but they're getting off. So why bother? Why bother caring? Why bother supporting your journalism? Why bother anything when the crooks get away with it? Well, then why bother living? Are we just going to pack it in and say, well, there's never any justice? Let's just pack it in? No. I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to stop fighting as a journalist. And I'm not going to stop fighting as a person, not just for Flint, but for all of us. And part of that fight is getting the truth out. And I do believe that if you keep plucking away, if you keep pushing the truth out, eventually the politicians have no choice. Eventually, the politicians have no choice but to do the right thing. So for those that are watching, a little tease, we have more information that will be coming out soon. After inauguration, I'm going to take a little break because I'm exhausted. I've been working on this story for 2 months, and that's the only thing I've been doing for 2 months. I need a break. I need to recharge physically and mentally. Spend time with my wife. We're getting a dog tomorrow, which I'm excited about. But Jen is still sick, unfortunately, so I have to recharge. You might not see me for about a week or so. We'll figure out how to keep the channel going while I take off. But I'm asking you, please, if you are not yet a paying Status Quo member, we are now at 1,810 Status Quo members. We got 3 new ones since I started. That's why it says 1,807. Please join us. statusquo.com/join. The reason that I was able to go to Flint, the reason that Jen has been able to go to Flint, the reason that I have been able to go many places is because we have right now 1,810 of you paying for it to happen. The reason that I have been able to keep going back to Flint and to go elsewhere, to build sources, to build trust that people will give us information, is because you have funded. I ain't independently wealthy. I don't have big banks funding me. We don't have fossil fuel companies funding us. We don't have pharmaceutical companies funding us. We don't have massive pharmaceutical, real estate, Silicon Valley, defense contractors, scum, plutocrats funding us. And we will not ever have that because we don't want it. So I know people are feeling dejected. I know people feel, you got a jaywalking ticket? Why bother, Jordan, what you're doing? Well, regardless of the outcome, I think the truth matters. I think fighting for the truth matters. And frankly, do you expect CNN to do it? Do you expect MSNBC to do it? The New York Times, the Washington Post? None of them broke any of this because none of them have been covering it. None of them broke any of this because none of them have gone back to Flint time and time again. And by the way, they have way more resources than we do. They don't have to do GoFundMe. They don't have to beg people to sign up as a member for $5 a month. So I'm asking you, and I'm pleading with you, frankly, sign up. We are so close to 2,000 paying members. We want to hire another person. We want to hire another reporter. We want to hire people to help us with marketing, help us with social media, help us on the tech end so I don't have actual green screens behind me. But we don't have an investor. We don't have a magic money tree. So please support us. Statusquo.com/join. If you're already a member, another great way you could support us, hop over to our GoFundMe. Chip in whatever you can. I know it's tough times for everybody. So chip in a couple bucks if you can. We really appreciate it. Before I go, let me read a couple super chats. By the way, I'll be on with Graham Elwood tonight around 7, so soon. Let me read a couple super chats. Robin, $5. Thanks for your reporting. And Jen's, Melissa Mays is such a warrior, 100%. A gladiator. Lady Hawk, $4.99. Thank you, Status Quo, for breaking this very important story. This is the reason I became a member. Please keep up the real journalism. We will. As much as you support us, we will. Seth Peterson, $30. Thanks, Jordan and Jen. All the reporting you do on this, these people deserve to be in prison for decades. Blood is on their hands. Sadly, in this effed up system, you're rewarded, not penalized if you're rich. So true. John, $5. So is this it for Snyder's legal consequences? As of now, correct. That is it. Austin, $5. Real journalism supported by the people. Better than the mainstream. Help them out and spread the word. God bless you, Austin. Egg64, $5. What Rick Snyder and his co-conspirators did is Hague worthy. I agree. TM Martin, $25. Bravo, Jordan and Jen. Hi. You satisfied with Governor Snyder charges? Seems like AG Nessel could have charged one theft nerd this way years ago. Agreed. And no, I'm not satisfied. 100% not satisfied. Big Baby Zubas, $2. Flint deserves clean water. Thanks for fighting. Appreciate it. TM Martin, $25. The fix is in Michigan. Worst state for transparency and justice. Behamut, $2. I just watched a SQ riot video on MSNBC. Yep, that was John Farina's great historic footage for us at the Capitol attack. Juan Pedro, $14.99. Thanks for all your hard work. Been following Jordan's work for years now. Glad to see him back at it here. Presence, $5. Jordan, I'll do a cognitive enhancement consult with you for free, no catch. I don't know what a cognitive enhancement consult is. If you have a colon enhancement, I would love to hear it because I need to shit. Excuse my French. All right, folks, got to go. I'll be on Roland Martin's program tonight, 6:45. He has his own YouTube channel, Roland Martin Unfiltered. I'll be on at 6:45 with him. I'll be on at 7 o'clock p.m. Tonight with Graham Elwood. So that's 4 p.m. Pacific, Graham Elwood tonight. I'll be on with Rising with Crystal and Sagar in the morning, and a couple other things that I can't keep track of. Thank you for your support. I need to go pee. I need to go eat before I do these interviews. Please sign up as a Status Coup member for as low as $5 a month. $5 a month. $5 a month. Statuscoup.com/join. Just got a couple more members signed up. Welcome to the party. New member Shannon. Welcome new member Bernie. Not Sanders, but Bernie. Welcome new members Danielle. Welcome new member Devin. Welcome new member Fletcher. Welcome new member Stephen. We're now at 1,814. 1,814 Status Coup members. Hey, I see 2,000 within sight. So we're at 1,814. Keep signing up, statuscoup.com/join. By the way, you know the drill. As a Status Coup member, you get access to our members only Discord, which is a lot of fun. You get access to our members only members call, which is once a month. We're not doing it this week because frankly, I'm exhausted. Maybe next week we'll do the monthly members call and you could ask us whatever you want about this story and other things. So please sign up as a member, $5 a month. That's 16 cents a day. I know there's a lot of other outlets begging you for money. With all due respect, ask those outlets when they've gone to Flint. Ask those outlets what they're doing other than bloviating in a studio. Bloviating's good. There's a lot of good bloviators. There's very few in the trenches reporters investigating the truth. The truth is the only thing that matters. Good night. I will be on Roland's show in 10 minutes and Graham's show at 7. Thanks for watching. Sign up, statuscoup.com/join. Peace out.